Good day, everyone. I am Kay Manalastas and I'm going to tackle about Mimetic Theory. First, let's focus on this artwork. So this artwork is entitled The Three Brides by John Turop and it is made in 1893. So what do you think this artwork symbolizes? Or what can you observe in this artwork? The artist Turop was a Dutch artist who was born in Java, and this artwork was derived from Javanese puppet theaters. So, this artwork is an allegory of three states of the soul, consisting of the bride dedicated to Christ, the woman at the middle, the bride dedicated to earthly love, the woman at the left corner, and the satanic bride on the right, who appears to be Egyptian, adorned with a small necklace with skulls and a grasping small snake. So what is the purpose of the artist in making this work? So the artist's purpose or goal was to relate humans to the spiritual world, specifically identifying women as the source of evil. So in simple terms, this artwork tackles or represents everything about women. So, why did I include this artwork when we're about to discuss literary works? It is because, like any form of art, literature is mimesis. So now you've encountered the word mimesis. Let's now proceed on defining the word mimesis or what is mimetic theory. Mimetic theory is derived from the ancient Greek word mimesis, which means imitation or representation. So always remember that when you hear the word mimesis, it always interconnects or it's an equivalent word for imitation or representation in common parlance. So, mimic theory also describes the process of imitation or mimicry through which artists portray and interpret the world. The artists interpret the world. It is also a term used in philosophy and literary criticisms, and it enables readers and listeners to suspend their disbelief, identify with characters, and get deeply immersed in a text. Some literary artists base their works in real life events. So that's why at some point reader gets easily attached or they can relate to the work because some of the instances or some of the situations presented in the, say for example, in a book have happened to the readers or to the real life of the reader or will possibly happen to them in the future. So that is the description or the concept of mimic theory. Now, what is mimesis in terms of literature? Accordingly, literature is the imitation, recreation, representation of something in the real world of ideal entities from which the subject is derived. So later on, we will going to have discussion about some literary works that show or value mimesis, and we are going to discuss about this one. Now, let's proceed on. Literature provides a description, interpretation, and expression of life. When the author finds experience worth writing, he then orders this reality to suit his vision of the world by recreating this experience according to his vantage point. So, I've previously read a novel written by Khaled Hosseini entitled A Thousand Splendid Suns. So, if you're familiar with this novel is something related to war survival. So the author himself has an experience interacting with war survivors. So he incorporated his experiences as he made his writings or his work and turning his experience into vantage points. So next is, accordingly, both artwork and literary work commonly focus on one or a combination of the following concerns. First is the work as an entity itself. So, is it in a form of poetry, a form of novel, a form of art? The work as an entity itself. Next is the universe that it reflects. Does it reflects real life events, real life situation, real life character? Number 3 is the author and his purpose. And last, the readers whom the work is for. So, now, we are going to discuss the literature as a form of imitation, recreation, representation of something in real world of ideal entities. Ito na yung sinabi ko kanina. So, we have here some of the literary works in our module, and these are, first we have Mayday Eve by Nick Joaquin, Gapo by Luwalhati Bautista, Dekada 70 by Luwalhati Bautista, Cubao by Tony Perez, and the song Empire State of Mind by Alicia Keys and Jay-Z. Let's start with Mayday Eve. So, what is the content or what is this literary work all about? So, this work captures the ambience of the 19th century Intramuros. The reader may observe this ambience through the portrayal of the gas lamps, streets, carriages, and the clothes of the characters, or even the dances during the era that is included or noted in this work. So it captures the ambience of 19th century Intramuros. Next is, the novel was about a man who forgot how he loved the woman that he loved in the past. So the main character here is Ageda and Don Badoy. Both of the character, Ageda and Don Badoy, describe each other as an evil, as a devil, and as a witch. By that, we can conclude that their marriage is indeed a failure. Aside from that, the characters, Ageda was described to be a bold, liberated, and non-conformist young woman who was ahead of her time, while Badoy was characterized in the beginning as a promiscuous young man who wanted to prove his machismo, but then he realized that he was deliriously in love with Ageda. So this literary work represents or portray marriage. Diba? Next is Gapo by Luwalhati Bautista. Gapo by Luwalhati Bautista, or the author, took a glimpse of the reality and put it into the story. And the author makes every detail of the narration seem to be realistic. So the content of this novel is that it shows, the book emphasizes a socially relevant dilemmas between the Filipino and American citizens. This reminds the Filipinos of the unruly government of the U.S. in the midst of World War II. So in this work, it illustrates how Filipinos was treated unfairly, and they were underestimated and abused by the so-called friendly nations. it also shows how weak and foolish the Philippine government is during American occupation. There are Filipinos, we are aware that there are Filipinos who disrespect our fellow men, right? They were the one who promotes unfairness, discrimination, injustice towards one another. And they were the ones who humiliate our own country. So this book allows us to take a peek on the circumstances that the Filipino people had experienced under US occupation. So it represents everything that happened in our history, in a Filipino history. Yun. How about Dekada 70? Dekada 70 was an award-winning novel by Luwalhati Bautista. It shows how a middle-class family becomes aware of the political policies that led into the state of martial law. So it is the story of an average middle-class family caught in the midst of the politically and socially circumstances in the 70s, in the decade of the 70s. And it is also a novel turned movie which depicts the struggle of the Bartolome family, which consists of a mother, Amanda. In the film, Amanda is Vilma Santos. And Amanda, the lead character, realizes the implications of living under a dictator after seeing the reactions of her husband and her 5 sons. So, their family experienced a traumatic decade of martial law in the Philippines, wherein they are full of bombings, random arrests, and political prisoners. As a Filipino government becomes more oppressive, the Filipino become more radical, and the Bartolome family witness and experience it all. So, now, this certain literary work, Dekada 70, represents the struggle of a family. How about Cubao by Tony Perez? What is the content of this book? So this shows that gay liberation in the Philippines. This is entirely based on the gay liberation in the Philippines. So Tony Perez includes the character of Butch and Tom along his brother, and his characters abominates male homosexuals. So there's an instance in the story wherein Butch, one of the character, shouted atop the Araneta Coliseum. Yes, you can read it by yourself, which is utterly similar when Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe called homosexuals as worse than dogs and pigs because of their unnatural perversion. So, because of that, the novela's claim on being the first shout of gay liberation in the Philippines becomes questionable kasi it has a problematic portrayal of the gays in the country. Parang it disrespect gays or homosexual in the country. That's why it is seen as problematic. But in simple terms, this literary work was about homosexuals. According to Socrates, poetry and music are all imitation. Why is that so? So now we are going to tackle about the song Empire State of Mind by Alicia Keys and Jay-Z. So, here is an excerpt from the lyric of the song. In New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of, there's nothing you can't do. Now you're here in Now you're in New York. These streets will make you feel brand new. Big lights will inspire you. Let's hear it from New York. So what is from the lyrics, you can already have a prior knowledge that this certain song was primarily about the city of New York. So, Empire State of Mind portray and replicate today's New York. So, if you would analyze its lyrics, it ables to replicate the city since the city was the subject of the song. So the listeners of the reader can see the New York of today in a realistic view kasi there are things included in the song like the working group and family relations, the locations and sceneries, popular modes of entertainment, history of the New York that deals with the terrorist group wherein the listeners or the readers can see in realistic view the city of New York. It also illustrates what is really happening in the people of New York. So there are people being so liberated, attitudes of playing money like a superior being, and often challenges the capability of God in saving people. So as you can see, looking on the perspective of this song, we could analyze that New York is not as perfect as we thought it could be. Now, for the conclusion or for the summary, we discuss here the definition of mimetic theory. We also tackle how literary work is a form of imitation or representation of the world. We also discuss Mayday Eve, Gapo, Dekada 70, Cubao, and Empire State of Mind song as we analyze its content or the content of this work that relates to the concept of mimetic theory. This will be the end of my report, and thank you all for listening.